I myself, the producer of this podcast, is not eligible to diagnose anyone with a mental health disorder. This podcast is purely for artists discussing the mental health hurdles they struggle with on a daily basis. Enjoy. Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. And today I have an actress on that I've had the pleasure of being in one virtual acting class with through Robin Parrish, and we just kind of friended each other on social media. I see that you're working a lot on a bunch of different stuff. It seems like you're very busy. You reached out saying, "Hey, I'm I'm an advocate for mental health and arts, and I would love to come on and talk." And I really appreciate that a lot. And then today I have actress. Are you writer, director, producer? Do you do any of those as well?
I have done a little production work. I am wanting to start writing my own stuff, so soon I'll be able to add that to my
Awesome.
bag of
Awesome.
tricks, but primarily just an actor for now.
Well, welcome, Sarah. What's up? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Thank you for coming on. And wanted to talk about this specific topic for those who haven't heard my whole spiel before each episode. I let each guest, I give them a list of topics to discuss and see what they would like to talk about. And this is one Sarah picked. And it's basically how depression and anxiety affect artists, specifically artists rather than non-artists. Was there something that you that drew you to this specific topic?
Just the fact that you mentioned it, I think that there's such a negative stigma with depression and anxiety, and it's like, growing up as a kid, late Generation X, I guess. I kind of feel more like a Gen Xer than an elder millennial, but it wasn't okay to talk about those stuff. And for me, I lost my dad when I was really young, and I didn't really learn how to process emotions until later in life. And so that's how I kind of got into theater. Theater was an escape for me, and it almost felt wrong to be that happy and allowed to express myself in a sort of healthy outlet, if you will, as opposed to other means. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that I was actually really depressed for a long time. And so now that I'm older, and I'm sort of like course correcting and try to rewire and all of that, just to be a better person and just to have a better overall balance, which I think has helped a lot with the artistry.
So how long have you been acting for?
I was 11. I did my first musical. It was Grease. I thought I was super cool. I was just in the chorus, but yeah, it was a local production through the Boys and Girls Club. And then it took me a while to come out of my shell. And so then I didn't get back into theater until I was in high school. And I was convinced I was going to do it in college, but the college that I got into wasn't offering theater as a major. So I went the communications route and kept going, eventually getting my terminal degree. And then when I was finishing out my PhD, I got back into acting because it was something I always wanted to do. I always felt kind of like something was missing. So
Yeah.
I wanted to get back into it.
It's always something where, especially if I feel like if you continue to be drawn to something, and it doesn't have to be arts, but in this case it is. If you're or keep drawn to it, and it's something that makes you happy, like then it's no, I mean I don't know, it's a kind of a no brainer to keep doing it, and I think it's tough for you know people to work a 9 to 5 and still like act, but you're one of a handful of people I know still doing that, balancing a pretty long job, or a job that does take a lot out of you, and then like, you're all right, I gotta turn around and do auditions and do classes and things of that nature. So it's really not for the faint of heart, and I think things like that add to I guess anxiety and depression. Have you been to therapy? Are you currently going? What are your thoughts on therapy?
And I go back to what I was saying earlier when I was younger. It was kind of I sort of looked at it as sort of like, oh, it's only the it sounds bad about what I'm about to say, and I certainly don't mean it this way, but because my views changed, as the conversations have become healthier surrounding mental health. Um, but I never took the time to go to therapy when I was a kid. I was kind of I shied away from it, and then being Hispanic, especially being from South Texas and really close to Mexico along the border, it was just kind of frowned upon, I guess you could say. So I just didn't get into it. And then when I was working a corporate job, I actually got held at gunpoint. Yeah. It's pretty scary seeing my life flash
Jesus
before my
Christ.
eyes, but it
What?
was sort of the catalyst that got me into therapy, and it started to uncover a lot of the stuff that I didn't realize was beneath the surface. And it started to manifest as I got older, and it was always like, why am I so anxious? Why am I always like kind of sad, you know?
Yeah.
So yes, I do go to therapy. I've been in therapy now for almost 4 years.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure anyone would want to go to therapy after being held at gunpoint. And and that's insane. And you said it was from your day job, or
I would go to school every other Saturday working on my graduate degree, and then I would go to work on the days that I wasn't in school. So it was a Saturday that I wasn't in school and I was working. It was supposed to be a half day. I was supposed to go have lunch with my mom. And I was like, oh, by the way, I'm going to be late just a little. Things happen for a reason. And like I said, I really kind of look at it as a blessing in disguise because it uncovered a lot for me. And I always knew that I needed to address those things because I got into a lot of, I wouldn't say unhealthy behavior, but I mean, lack there of a better term, sort of how I spent my 20s, just kind of like running away from stuff or resorting to alcoholic beverages to sort of ease the pain, if you will.
yeah,
Nothing terrible, but
yeah.
we all have our different ways of coping, and I just got to the point where I was like, this isn't healthy.
So would you say, I guess, you said therapy, going to therapy kind of unlocks something in you. Do you think it helps you out with your art?
It's so interesting that you mentioned it earlier because a lot of people don't really get what the artist life is about, right? Because like you said, it is working the regular job, and for some people that's different for everybody. And sometimes you do have to work the 9 to 5, or you do have to work full time just to support yourself, especially in New York, and to be able to do the acting things. Because if you don't, then I think that sort of lends itself to anxiety and depression. And in therapy, fortunately, I do have a really great therapist that she lets me talk about it, and we talk about like what is the norm for an artist. And the thing is there is no norm for the artist, but I will say, I'm sure you could relate to this. It's like there does come a certain amount of anxiety if you're not, or comes with it, if you're not always auditioning all the time, or it's always like book, 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 and why aren't you booking, and you're not doing enough. And so I think that um they coincide. And I remember when I was in school at Stella Adler, I did the summer conservatory. We talked a lot about how growth as an actor and a human being are synonymous, right? So I've noticed a change in my work, like the more in depth, or the more I try to approach things that are creating roadblocks for me in my work, have allowed me to also open up as well and grow as an artist. And I find that it's easier to empathize with the character as well, put yourself in the character's shoes.
I kind of I think everything, you know, I've been trying to talk about on here, kind of all of those roads to me lead to this topic because it's like, I just wanted to start acting because I enjoyed it, doing it here and there, and then I started taking it seriously, like by going to classes. But I still feel like an imposter when I'm in acting classes because I'm like, oh man, I can't act. I just can't. Like, I feel like I can't act, and if I'm on set with someone or I go to, I haven't been to a lot of auditions as everyone else seems to be. So it's just kind of like everything that you go through, I personally think is really like it just leads to your anxiety, from what it sounds like to you, like you have a lot of outside forces, unfortunately, like leading to your anxiety, depression, and I'm sure a mixture of a mixture of you feeling like you have to quote unquote make it, right?
There is that, and it's also It's also a challenge because, like you said, if you haven't kind of like worked on your instrument, if you will, meaning like learning your body and learning your triggers and the way that you're gonna react under certain scenes or whatever the circumstance may be, it does kind of lend itself to imposter syndrome, and you do kind of feel like it's never good enough. But at the same time, I think for me, I've learned to embrace it. And I always just approach my work as a beginner. Not that I'm a beginner per se, but I'm certainly not where I used to be. And I find like just having that open mindset really helps with the actor work. And so yeah, like you said, they all kind of lead back to this, or sometimes like where the actor doesn't feel like they're good enough, and the truth is we are, and we can't be too hard on ourselves because we're still very much learning.
Yeah, I think that's something. You know, and I know I'm repeating myself, so like to the people who may have been listening already or not, but I started off directing writing, and there's very much a growth in that, and there's very much a learning curve in that, and I just was the reason I got into acting because I was like, all right, I was auditioning for a few things when I was living in Florida, and then no one was really casting. I was like, well, I know how to write and direct, so like, why not see what I can do, But I think no matter what where you come from, whether you're coming from the acting background or directing or writing, like, yeah, there's always room for, to grow and to be like, I know you said you're not necessarily new to it or inexperienced per se, but you're treating every, I guess, project character as if like you're kind of like a novice at it, and I think that's really important. I think that's really important to kind of go into it with like very green and very fresh and very like, oh, I can learn from this.
Yeah, I remember sitting in class one day, and it was a monologue class, and one of my coaches, it was through Stella Adler. He was talking about like how it's really important for actors to stay humble because like the day that you think that you're super good at it or like you don't have any room to grow is kind of like the day you won't have a career anymore. Um,
Yeah, I think that all the time, honestly. Like
like you can't get too cocky about it.
yeah, no, you can't. Like I think about that all the time. It's like, yeah, I feel like the moment people stop feeling like they can give anything to this world or to the art world is the day they absolutely have to stop. Um, like, yeah, they have to just stop being in it, because it's when you have filmmakers, writers, actresses, actors saying like, oh, I'm still learning, and they're, like a Meryl Streep type, or they're an older actor or actress, or even older director. It's like, man, if they're still learning till the day they die, like, then I don't want to hear any actor say, oh, I already got it down pat, I'm good, because it's a job, it's a craft, or it's a job where you're trying to learn the human condition. I guess that's a perfect word. And the human condition changes at every age. I'm 34. I wasn't the same. You mentioned about when you were in your 20s and you were handling stressful things by going out, partying, all that. That's how I think a lot of us did it. My parents split at a very young age, and it's not the same as what you went through, which is fucking horrifying. Honestly, I couldn't imagine. So to be able to be so young and not really know how to handle it, and then you get older and you realize what happened, and then you're an adult and you're like, geez, it's just, it's tough to deal, it's tough to navigate through, so the depression and the anxiety, like, it don't just makes sense, like, it is interesting that most artists kind of fall under that like cliche of like broken artist or like depressed artist, but it's like I feel like most artists just gravitate towards that. Do you feel that way too? Or I really don't know a happy artist, honestly. Like they could be happy on the surface and they could be great mood or great anything like that, but like I think when it comes down to it, they have some pain there that they just haven't let the world see yet.
Yeah, I remember sitting in class. By sitting in class, I mean I was on Zoom. And I was in my TV film class, and I remember my coach telling me, he's like, "Wow, you've been hurt really badly." And I was like, "If you only knew." And it was like, but yeah, like, of course, like I don't think anybody ever really gets through adulthood with any sort of without having some sort of trauma attached to themselves in some way, shape, or form. I think it's all really valid, no matter like what we've all been through. But to your point, yeah, I feel like my grief is kind of just like this thing that's always there, and I've just learned how to manage it. But at the same time, it's really taught me about being in the moment, being present, enjoying life and trying to be happy because you just really don't know when you're gonna get it. Or I mean
Yeah.
when it's gonna end or like
Yeah.
when this opportunity will leave you. But so yeah, I mean, it was really important to me to talk about it, anxiety and depression particularly because I think that, yeah, whether we realize it or not, somebody's going through something. And it's important that we all come together and talk about it because that's how we destigmatize it. And that's how we change the narrative and kind of look at it as, well, hey, like we're all human. We're all going through something. Like you're not alone, right? And like you said earlier, that's kind of what art is all about, right? Just trying to understand the human condition. So yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes I think
no.
all roads lead
Yeah.
back to
That
it.
I've tried really hard to make a project that, and I haven't yet, but like make a project that kind of encapsulates, I can't speak, that just kind of gathers everything that I've been feeling since like I was 28 until now, because I feel like there was a big shift in like my late 20s, early 30s. And only recently, like I've gotten married and, in a really healthy relationship. There's been other times where I really haven't been, and I've been that third, fourth, fifth wheel. And um, it kind of really affects you when you're in your 30s, or late 20s or anything like that. So, I mean, I think, yeah, trying to kind of draw from what you're going through and like trying to put it on, whether it be paper, on a canvas, on screen, in a classroom. I think, I know people tell you not to dig deep and use personal strife or personal problems, but I think, if there's a deep sadness in a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but there's like a deep sadness in you and a deep sadness in me, and acting teachers are able to kind of like see that. I think it is best to kind of utilize it at some point, because it seems like the sadness is just on, like you said, you were in a class. I don't know really the context if you just went through a scene and he was like, what the hell, I don't know if it's like on the surface, people see it on the surface with you or anything like that, but if it's on the surface, then I think it's easy to tap into it.
I don't really have anything to hide. I mean, I am who I am, and it's doesn't define me. But I mean, does it come up sometimes? Yeah, it does. And it's just like being kind or having that grace towards myself to be able to, like, okay, if I need to go there, I can. But, like you said, it's not really necessarily healthy all the time
Yeah, no,
because
it's not.
emotional recall is really painful and seeing work and it's not healthy. But at the same time, was it Chekhov said that if you want to have a great acting life, then just go and experience life. And I think that means that you don't shy away from the bad parts of it too. That was another reason I was like, oh, we should talk about this because it's like life's duality. I mean, some of those things happen that lead us to who we're supposed to be as a person and hopefully for the better.
Yeah, I mean, you actually kind of make a good point about how we're always supposed to only tap into, I guess, maybe the shit that bothers us, right? Or, that we got to work through. But like you just said it perfectly, like life's duality, like there's moments that it's great and there's moments that are not so great. And, I've shared with it 1,000 times on this podcast about, I've had a lot of ups and downs, this past few months, and everyone has. But I think that's just a perfect example of like really like what life is. It's just a shit ton of balancing acts, I guess, right? Or it's a shit ton of trying to figure out like, you know, okay, this month we had some like heartbreaking news, life altering news. Next month it's like, you just got something that's going to change your life for the better. So like it's all how you try to deal with it. And I think it's the older you get, honestly. Like I said, I'm in my mid 30s, and it's like, I was having a very serious conversation with my mom about like, because I went to a friend of mine, his sister passed away, and he's like, yeah, no, I feel terrible for him. And my mom's like, this is the worst. Like, she loved her 30s. I so far I'm not liking them, but I love my 20s. And and she was like, no, your 30s are good because you get to, for most part, you get to kind of figure out who you are, and financially you get to do shit that you really didn't get to when you were in your 20s, and this and that, and we were talking about it, and it's just like the flip side of that is that you go into a lot of your friends, maybe parents' funerals, or you see like some family members getting older, and it's just tough to deal with. And I was like, I would do anything to get back to being a kid at some point, because like when you're a kid, you got like I had no fear. I really didn't, So, and I think that's just it's interesting, It's an interesting, and you could probably speak on, you had to kind of grow up quickly, I'm assuming, with your father passing. And was it just you and your mom? Did you have any sibling? Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, so my parents were married to other people before they married each other, so it was kind of like the modern version of the Brady Bunch. All my siblings are actually half. My mom had one son from her first marriage. My dad had three boys from his first marriage. I don't really consider them half. So I'm
Yeah.
technically the only child, but yeah, it's interesting because like nobody really talks about how grief or other sort of trauma that we experience throughout life, whether that's, grief, rape, all the taboo things that we're not supposed to talk about in today's modern society, but they're there. And I think it's all about how you handle it. And yeah, it's pretty scary sometimes. I mean, shit, some of the stuff that I dealt with even led me to, I had suicidal thoughts. And I think that, and nobody really talks about it because it's like, in relationships develop, whether platonic or friendships, right? Like eventually those things come out into the open, but they come up and fear happens. You mentioned fear, and it made me think, well, I think that if there's anything that those experiences have taught me, the really dark stuff is just that like it's always going to be there, and you can let it hold you back, or you can let it be the fuel that kind of ignites the fire under your ass. And to be honest, like I remember when I was in Houston before I came to New York, I was teaching at a university out there in Houston, and I'd come to New York, and I got really serious about acting like a year prior to me coming here, and it was like, all right, Ceballos, like you could just stay in Houston, and Houston's great, nothing bad to say about Houston, but not enough art.
It's not it's not the mecca for acting and art.
Right, right, and it was just like,
Certain cities have their own identity, and I don't think there's nothing to apologize for. But New York, LA, now Atlanta, it's the film. These are the film capitals of the United States right now.
and it was just like, okay, well, I got to do this. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I just gotta go. And I remember being like both really scared and also really excited to come here.
But that makes you human, though. Honestly, if you were one or the other, then it'd be like, okay, something's a little off. If you're not totally, you have a mixture of like I go through that every time I go on set, every time I'm acting, every time I go to a class. I'm like, what are people going to think of me? Yeah, it shouldn't. Yeah, and if it go, that's how I look at a lot of stuff, and I know we're talking more about our personal things too, but like when my parents split, like I had to know like why. My sister, who's 2 years younger than me, she's like, I don't give a fuck. Like they split, like it's not. I guess she didn't want to really live in it, but as I got older, I was like, I need to know why, personally, and I guess when you kind of start finding things out and you start like picking and prodding and doing all that, you're not going to like what you hear. But I say all that because it's like, one thing was like my parents just like stopped arguing. And I'm not saying like, oh, a healthy relationship, people argue, but like if you are bickering with your significant other, if you it kind of, to me, it's kind of like, all right, well, you kind of give a shit like you still give a shit that they you want their attention, or like you trying to or like if you do have a fight, you're like trying to fight to like get better. If you stop like fighting, my mom's like, we stopped fighting, I knew right then and there like neither of us gave a shit anymore, and I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. So that's, I always correlate to like, if I'm at a job and I don't care about the job anymore, I physically feel myself not giving shit about the job, or not caring about a project, or not caring about this, that's not good at. So I say all that to say, like, you to have that emotion in it. Like when you left Houston and you were on the way to New York and you were feeling all that's really good because you're not like, you were pushing yourself to do it. I think personally, I don't think artists get enough credit with how vulnerable we have to be, just in general. Like in general, like with everything, like I think our entire job is vulnerability. Like, all right, like I said, you and I get cast in a movie, then we have to do an intimate scene, and we're like, okay, this is super awkward. Like, this is super awkward. Or like, we're having a scene in a movie where, one of us has to open up about like maybe being suicidal, maybe being depressed. Like, these are all things that maybe some people, I don't know how you are about it. You seem very open about talking about it. Me, until this podcast, I was very much like, I don't want anyone to know what I'm going through. So yeah, there's that constant vulnerability.
No, and I mean that's also part of it too. And I think that that's like it's like an actor has to choose to be brave every single day. And it's sometimes I think I'm too open, and I have a lot of respect for people that aren't because
No, I'm open, but I used to be very open to stranger. Like, I don't want to say you and I are strangers. We know each other, but like we haven't hung out or anything. So like for me to straight up just be like blah 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 blah, blah and then like if you're kind of quiet, I'm like, fuck, I did it again. I overshared, but like that's just how I am. I would rather be that way than just be like, yeah, yeah, like.
I respect everybody's boundaries. Some
Mhm.
people are really reserved, some people aren't. On the one hand, the people that played a little bit more safe, they never get hurt. But then, and I mean, maybe they take risks in some other forms, but then it's like, well, I don't know if you follow John P. Shanley. He's one of my favorite playwrights, but he posted something the other day on Instagram, and it was like, well, if you're not taking risks, then it's like, did you ever really live in life? So it's like it's just a matter of like how you see
Well, it
things.
matters of yeah, it's a matter of what you technically think is a risk. What I'm saying. And I think I lived in Jersey. I moved to Florida for school, then I moved back home. All those are journeys. Like you said you lived South Texas on the border of Mexico. Um, and I'm sure you made your way up to Houston, then you made your way from Houston to the East Coast, and who knows where your heart and head might take you next, honestly, unless if you're absolutely like now you're a New Yorker and you're like, I'm never leaving. But if you feel the itch to do it, you don't seem to be like, I'm just gonna stay put. Staying put really never, I don't think, really did much for a lot of people. I can't see how any artist is so. I don't know any artists who are really more complacent than anything. They're always looking to kind of do something, and all that. So why do you think artists feel differently, or differently, yeah, than non-artists? And like I said, this is not a disrespect to non-artists or anything. I'm sure everyone goes through anxiety and depression who aren't in the arts, but why do you think actors feel so much, more than other professions out there?
I don't know that I've kind of always felt a little too much, even as a kid. I don't know if it's because like I have a Pisces moon or whatever. If you're into zodiac stuff, but I I don't know if I know the answer to that. I would say for me, like it's definitely it got a little bit more learned the more I studied because there was parts of me that I didn't want to share, but I feel like at the same time acting has or being an artist has created that safe space where it's okay to be human in that regard that there is people that aren't going to always hurt you because I have been burned a lot in my life too by um toxic relationships and things like that. But um being allowed to explore your craft, especially like in Robin's class that we took together, it was really refreshing and comforting. And it's like you find your people and you find out that you're not alone, and that kind of makes you brave to tackle the next thing. Or it's definitely like for me, I think it's a learned experience. And why actors are a little bit more vulnerable than non-artists. I think I think it's just because like you have that calling, like artists kind of know at an early age that they're supposed to do something and give to this world in such a big way that's bigger than themselves. Um, and it's I don't mean to talk about my alma mater so much, but I
Oh,
remember
okay.
we also learned in drama school one of the director of the drama school, Saller, was saying that like artists are the guardians of humanity. And it's sort of like this call, I would say maybe leadership for lack of a better term, or the need for social justice to create, like, if it's not the artist pushing the bill forward, then who? Like, how are we going to evolve as a society, I think, or be able to talk about the tough stuff if it's not the artist doing it? And it's like you said earlier, a lot of people think that it's really easy, and it's not. It's like the hardest thing I've ever had to do, honestly. And you just kind of see like the whole glitz and glamour of it all, or the finished product, but nobody ever really sees like how much goes into it. um I don't know, I couldn't tell you. I just think that artists have that unique trait or skill set that's either innate with them, born with it, or they learn it to where they just tackle things and fearless in a way.
When you're find yourself in a depressed state or an anxiety ridden state, do you think you can function as an artist if you are depressed and you have like an acting class or a project coming up? Would you, what is that like for you?
That's a great question. For me, if I'm anxious, it does block me in my work. So then um I have to go channel that. And I realize a lot of that stemmed from, me having to like do a lot of things at an early age on my own, and kind of always living in survival mode and realizing that that's not healthy. Um, and then it was in those classes in Houston where I started acting again, where I learned that that was blocking me. So I've kind of learned to run or to exercise or to meditate, so I stay pretty grounded and not in my head, so to speak, because great acting does not come from the head, right? It comes from the heart. And then when I'm depressed, it's tough. I just recently went through a life experience. Not too long ago, I had a family member that got diagnosed with cancer. Unfortunately, they're okay now, thank God. But I was pretty sad for a bit there the last couple of weeks, and I kind of had to like put it on the table for a sec and just focus on one thing at a time. And I don't know, something about acting, it just really kind of releases all of that. I think it's easier for me to act when I'm depressed than it is when I'm anxious.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm just trying to relate to you with this, and I don't know if I told you through text messages or whatnot about, like, I have a lot going on too, like with my stepfather and his stroke, and found out my aunt has stage 2 lung cancer as well. It takes you out of it. It's life. I hate to say it like that, and obviously when you're in the middle of it and or in the beginning of it, and you're like, oh my god, like this is what life is like now, like I'm never going to be able to overcome this, or I'm never going to be able to, like, it's nothing is going to be the same. And like, 6 7 months down the road, yeah, life is different, but and stuff like that, you have to remember, like, still treat that person or treat every scenario as if like really nothing changed, and that'll help you kind of get by. But I haven't been able, besides this podcast, been able to really create anything and do anything. And I've acted in a few people's films here and there, just as a day player, or as reoccurring here and there, nothing crazy. And it's really has affected me, because it's like I can't seem to fucking like shake this, and I'm really feel like I'm stuck, and I'm trying to push through a wall, and the wall has there's no, or push through something, and there's just no give. And creatively, and like the only thing I've thought of creatively was a script about suicide, about a character going somewhere to go kill himself. And it's like that was never really like, I was never really like that. I always tried writing semi-serious stuff, but nothing to where it's like a character going to kill himself. So it's like, man, like, am I happy that like I'm actually forming ideas now, or is it kind of like, dude, like, take a break, maybe relax, you have a lot going on, take a breath, and don't force it.
And no, that's exactly what I was gonna say, is like it's about, because I don't know, I think like every actor is different, and some people can function with it and some people can't. And some people like, it's about knowing your instrument and knowing your limits, and sometimes you can work with it and sometimes you can't. And if you can't, that's okay too. And I think that we need to remember that, especially as artists, and kind of not worry about the business side so much or not worry about the end goal and just
Yeah.
be human because that's what acting is about anyway, or being an artist or writing,
Yeah.
which I will say,
Yeah, a lot of people have told me that they journal in general, whether artist friends or not, and it says it helps, and all that. Really quick, are you still down? Are you still good to keep talking, right? I know it's 8 o'clock, but cool, cool. All right. Um, yeah, going back to the journal thing, yeah, my therapist makes me journal a lot, and she does some exercises that are really helpful. Whether it be writing, whether it be, there's always this weird. This term has a weird like meaning around like role playing. Nothing crazy, nothing weird. Just like it's like I am talking to someone I have an issue with, and she's that person. Everyone thinks role playing is either cosplay or anything else dirtier. It's nothing like that. It's just her letting me have the space where I'm able to talk and treat her as such, and I think that's very interesting. Um, so so you said you're you're more focused, or your art is better when you're depressed versus when you're anxious.
it's a little bit easier to like perform, I would say. I don't know, but there's been times where I've been really anxious to go on stage and I'm like, you just gotta do it. I mean, it's it's I hate to say that situational, but sometimes it is.
Yeah.
And then there's days where I can't do anything and I have to sit with it because if I don't, then I'm kind of suppressing it again. And that's not healthy either. But I think like having that awareness of like knowing where you're at as an artist, whether you know that you can manage with it or
Mhm.
if you know you're like, no, I can't, and taking a step back from stuff, I think is also really important.
Did you start off acting on stage or on film?
Stage. But then when I got back into it, about 5 years ago, it was film.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. Has there been what are the challenges for you for both film and stage? Or what are some and then what are some like oh, you feel very confident, some things like that where you feel like, oh, I feel great.
Go figure. I kind of am a natural, so it seems. In drama, I'm like, no, but I'm like, I want to get into comedy because it's happier. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's that's going back to life experiences and helping you kind of tap into whatever you need to be able to relate to that character if you can, right? Knowing your balance and not harming yourself in the process. Do certain things come easier for me? Uh, it really just depends. Sometimes there's roles that I've been really able to relate to the character in a theatrical space. Um, and I could just like know the character and it comes a little bit easier as opposed to some other characters that are a little bit more of a stretch. I think for TV film, the challenge, of course, is battling the self tapes. They just had this conversation with another actor the other day, and it was just like I really miss in-person auditions because you could get adjustments and you were like, you knew how to course correct. So I think for me right now, that's a challenge, course correcting on my self tapes and making sure that I'm kind of getting the version of the character that the casting director is looking for. But that's hard to determine because I'm not in the room with them. And
Yeah.
there's so many other things that go into casting besides, just type. They could be, want somebody younger, they want somebody older, they could less attractive, more attractive. It's yeah. Um, do I prefer one or the other? I kind of enjoy TV film a little bit more, but then again, theater is just always rich and rewarding too.
Yeah, I've never done theater. I've only done film, and I auditioned for theater in 2021, and I made it to the last like audition. Like they held 3 auditions. I made it to the third one and didn't get it, which made me feel really good because it's like I've never done it before. So that it's very small small playhouse here in New Jersey. So I was like, yeah, no, it was like, oh, that's something. But she knew right away. She knew I was a film. I came from the film world right away because I I wasn't like projecting enough or being loud or anything. I thought that was really funny because film is all about you
Yeah, and
know
that was the thing I was gonna say. Getting starting back again, going to TV film, and then when I came to New York and I started training on the theater side, it was like, oh, you're too small, and then so I had to learn to be bigger. And that's something now that I've learned that it's No, that's a challenge sometimes in TV. I'm like, okay, dial it back, dial it back.
It's funny. They said you're too small. It's like, well, what do you want me to do? You know, like, what are you expecting? You know, do you as an artist, have you ever made yourself, um, like if you were already feeling like upset, right? And you're like, I can either try to shake myself off or I could like bury myself in this, right? I think everyone goes through that. Do you think like be for you personally or other artists, do you think other artists or yourself make yourself like depressed to create more effective art?
No, no. For me, I don't find that. For me, I can't speak for other artists. I don't find that healthy. Um, that's kind of yeah, I don't find it healthy. Have I done it? Probably. When I was much more greener and very novice to it again, I probably did on realizing that that wasn't healthy because it's like, there's only so many times that you can relive some traumatic events before it doesn't trigger you anymore. And so, then in acting in drama school, they always say, well, that's what they call it acting. And, there's other tools to relate to the characters. If I'm already in that state, that's different.
Yeah.
Usually try to use that energy to just like get through the scene, especially if the scene calls for being, sad or angry. It's kind of easier to tap into that character if you're already there, but feelings are temporary. So that's why you use, imagination work and body movements and stuff like that, or some of Uta Hagen's techniques to get you to that truth of the character.
One thing I've just been asking actors all across the board is their thoughts on method acting. And if they do it or not. I won't tell you what everyone else's answer is until until I hear yours. I'm just interested because I think it's something that's not talked about at all, and I think people who do it, it could really do a lot of damage to the mental health and to the brain and all that. So, um, and I'll give you my like honest opinion as well after I hear yours.
I had this conversation with my coach back in Houston. I went home about a month ago, and I hadn't seen her, since before the pandemic, and it was very warm and cathartic, a homecoming experience, if you will, because it's like when you start training with somebody and then you go off into a bigger market, you want to make them proud. And I just was like in a state where I didn't think that I would have. But she was like, "You're out there, you're doing it, you're in the arena. I'm so proud of you." But we had that conversation to answer your question, and we were I was telling her for me that it just kind of always goes back to the basics, right? What are the given circumstances of the scene? What is the character going through? Where are they? All the basic fundamental questions. That's kind of somewhat foundational in method acting. I mean, um, they all kind of come from Stanislavski, right? Like if you look at the trajectory of theater theory, if you will, I guess, and you had Stella Adler, you had Meisner, and you had Uta Hagen, and then you had Strasberg, which everybody kind of frowns on Strasberg because that's where you get the unhealthy acting. But they all kind of borrow from it in a way, whether we like it or not. I think, are there dangers with it? Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, sometimes some actors will just go to the deep end, and that's not healthy. There was this joke we had in drama school where they would say, like, don't do the like if the scene calls for being sad or like you have to break up with your significant other, whatever, they're like, don't go do that in real life. Like they called it Lindsay Lohan acting.
That's funny.
Apparently that's what she did. And I'm like, no shade against her either. But I mean, but they were kind of trying to make a point, right? Like, don't go like wreck your home if that's what you think is gonna help you.
I don't see the point in it. Everyone says like if you do it, it's kind of detrimental to the environment on set and the environment that you're portraying. Like Shia LaBeouf is really into it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I also think that the term is um like I think all actors have a certain method. I know it sounds stupid or silly, but like if I'm doing a role where like my last movie, I keep bringing this up when we talk about method acting, but like the last thing I did was where I had to play a character where like my kid was missing, and I didn't drink, and I mean I wasn't sleeping for days, and I was drinking a lot. Now, was I doing that in real life? No, because I need my 6 to 8 hours of sleep. but I was listening to music. I think obviously makeup is a big thing. It can help out with that, as silly as it sounds. But getting into that headspace of like being on set and like, for me, I was the writer producer. My friend was directing, so he had to handle. I asked him, "Do you need help with crew?" He's like, "No, just focus on your character." So I put my headphones in and I went away, and I just kind of like got into the zone. To me, that's some sort of method. Now, am I going home like that character? No, I'm not. But the hour drive home from set from the city to home, and I'm able to unwind. I think that also helps too. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Eventually, you kind of just borrow from everybody and make your own acting. Kind of,
Yeah,
yeah, get your own method going and
interpretation
whatever.
of it. Yep.
Yeah, whatever works for each actor is unique and different. And then it's like, yeah, then you have to have that time to come out at character depending on how deep you have to go with it. So yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, to an extent, yes, but also no, because it's unhealthy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Before we sign off here, do you have any parting words for any actor, actress, young, old, same age, going through it? Anything that you can help with, or is there a message you want to send to future Sarah down the road? That to listen to this or anything like that. But no, if you have words of wisdom or any notes to.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind right now, I always think of Dolly Parton. And it's so crazy because she's out there, but she's great at it. But she always said, "Figure out who you are and do it on purpose." And those are words that have stuck with me since I was a kid. And I have to remember that who I am changes. And I'm also learning to not be afraid of that, and just embrace life, whether that's good or bad. Eventually, we all get to where or who we're supposed to be. So, yeah, if there is an artist or actor that is going through a tough time and dealing with these things, my parting words would be like, "You're not alone." I know it sounds like a cliche, but things do eventually get better, and you get better, and it's all about. I've learned to kind of just sort of find the silver lining, if you will, or staying grateful even during the tough times, because that's how you get to the good times too. You can't have one without the other. So I think it's all a part of growth and learning as well and embracing it.
Perfect. I love that. Love it. All right. Thank you for hopping on here and talking and being very open and vulnerable. And I think all that will definitely help someone listening to this if they need it. Thank you again, Sarah, for hopping on, and everyone who else who's listened to this podcast. Thank you, and until next time.
Thank you, Chris. We'll see you later.
Once again, this is Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. I'm host and producer of the podcast, Christopher Orangeo. All episodes will be available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. Once again, this is Chris Orangeo, and thank you for supporting.